Ric Bucher, sponsored by Mercedes-Benz, the best or nothing. I don't know if you watch the UFC thing, but it is some of the only sports we have. Are you a UFC guy at all, Rick?
I'm sorry that I missed it now. After all of that, I'm like, damn it, what the hell was I doing?
Listen, I know some people think it's a little too harsh. I mean, when it first came out, the women's division for me, I was like, I don't know, this is a little harsh. And then everything gets normalized. And I sat there Saturday night, and I thought it was so entertaining. The fights were outside of one heavyweight fight, very, very evenly matched. So there you go. All right, I want to talk about. I said yesterday to start my show, conspiracy theorists drive me nuts. I'm not sure there's ever been a sports conspiracy theory that's been proven true. I know I went online yesterday. There's been a handful historically that have been proven true, but. You know, the gambling thing Jordan forced out, I never bought into. As somebody who covered the league, was it a fair topic when it came up back then?
It was a fair topic in terms of, so what's going on? This is rather abrupt. There's a lot of talk about the gambling. We didn't know the depth of his gambling and whether there were issues there. Jordan. There's a lot of extrapolation. Jordan is notorious for not tipping, for being a terrible tipper.
Yeah,
and I think people extrapolated he's notorious for not paying his debts necessarily, or rolling them over and saying, "Let's go double or nothing," whatever it might be. And so there began a connecting of the dots without any real evidence. But this idea that there was a depth to Jordan's gambling, and keep in mind, we were also in a different era where any gambling association with sports and sports figures was a huge negative, a huge red flag. And I just don't think our mindset is the same today as it was then. So there was just a little too much unknown with a big figure, and people, obviously rumors did run rampant. The problem is that those rumors then began to appear in print without any real objectivity or proof behind them. And I don't think I think this happens with major figures, is we stop looking at them as human beings. And the idea that anyone would associate the death of Michael Jordan's father and attribute it to something that he did and would do that cavalierly is just horrific in my mind. But people weren't looking at they were looking at Michael Jordan as this deity, this figure, this god, this larger than life person, and they weren't connecting. Do you understand what you're really doing here? You're saying that he basically caused the death of his father without any real proof. And I think if you stopped and looked at it that way, it would have given anybody pause for saying it or writing it. But that's not what happened. And so as we look back, as the doc looks back at it, you look at it and you go, man, what is with the media to ever allow these conspiracy theories? It's one thing to have these conversations in a press room.
Yes.
It's another to put them in print and have the public consume them.
Yeah, I said this to Doug Gottlieb yesterday. I can go on the air on a single source story if it's not damaging to the person. If I hear like Baker Mayfield struggling with Freddie Kitchens and he doesn't respect Freddie Kitchens, I can say that with one source. But if it's a punitive mark on somebody's reputation, I gotta have 2-3 sources on it. It was remarkable to me that the media was connecting the two without as Bob Costas said, without a thimble of evidence. I mean, one of the things that was also interesting years later, Rick, is that when Michael came back, he still gambled.
Right.
It wasn't like he stopped gambling.
Right.
Like if you got fired from a place or suspended because they said you were berating coworkers and they brought you back, you probably wouldn't berate coworkers anymore. Michael came back and he was, on the documentary, he's gambling with security guards. He's gambling with janitors. It's like if it was that much of an issue, Michael would have been very careful to never be filmed again, ever gambling on anything. And the documentary shows after he came back, He just gambled every day, golfing, throwing quarters up against a wall. So, I mean, that you can respond to that, but that's kind of my takeaway.
Yeah, no. And that's the part that I wish, and I guess I understand. First of all, the documentary is a Jordan production, and the whole, I feel as if there's an underlying purpose to this, which is let me remind everybody who I was, and let me set the record straight on a couple of things that are lingering out there.
Yeah.
And that's the purpose of this. But I would love to have, and I wish this documentary was doing this, is to truly understand what it was about Michael Jordan's desire to gamble on everything and anything and to add juice. Because you look at it, you look at what he was able to accomplish and the levels at which he competed. And on one hand, I would say, dude, you were playing for championships every year. You were playing for this legacy above everything else. Like, what was it about pitching quarters with a security guard that just added to your life? Like, I'd be interested in understanding what it was that drove that in him, not to look at it from a negative, but simply like the whole dynamic of how Michael Jordan operated and how his brain worked. That's what I wish I was getting more of when it comes to the gambling subject.
You know, I'll throw my Psych 101 cap on. That Michael was so great, and some of it was so easy for him to dominate that he needed juice in his life. He needed constant juice in his life because women were attracted to him, men were attracted to him. He dominated the game. Money wasn't an issue. Michael needed juice. He needed juice every second of his life because he'd gotten so rich. People were throwing themselves, men and women, at him, and it was like, how do I keep, we always see him kind of creating these mythical rivals that don't really exist, like LeBradford Smith. And I think Mike is just always, he's seeking juice. He needs competition because you can get bored very easily when things come easily to you. Joining us, by the way, Bucher, last night I had a buddy over my house, smoked a cigar, drank some wine, and he's a restaurateur. And I asked him.
I know who he is, and I saw it, and I was jealous, okay? Let me just jump to the fore on that.
Okay, so he told me Michael Jordan was a great tipper. So that Michael came to a restaurant he had in St. Louis because Michael's son was training or doing something in St. Louis. If he played at University of St. Louis, I don't know. And he said Jordan was a massive tipper, and I just got a call from somebody during the break that's close to Michael, and he said when he went to dinner with Michael, he was a huge tipper. So Pippen was no tippin' Pippen. But I have heard stories that Michael was a massive tipper.
I've heard both.
Okay.
I've heard that he stiffed some people, and but I will take the word from others that he also tipped. But I've heard stories where when he was golfing, typical leave something for the caddy or leave something for the guy who cleans your clubs, and they got nothing for Jordan, and it stood out just because we know how much Jordan makes.
By the way, I'll throw this out to defend Jordan on this, and I want your opinion on this.
Yeah.
So for years, when I would go to hotels, I never tipped. I never left any money at the hotel for the people that clean the room, and it wasn't. Right. I didn't think I was a jerk. I didn't even know that was like a thing. So for the first 30 years of my life, I never left a penny for anybody in a hotel because I didn't know that was a position you tipped. And now I always leave a 20 or, a couple 20s. So is it possible that there are people out there, especially based on, we all have different backgrounds, different cultures. Sports are now all international. Some cultures may be more celebratory. Some tip more. Some don't. Is it possible that some young guys aren't just bad tippers? They don't know when to tip.
I think that's very possible.
Okay.
I think there's also just not knowing what positions need to be tipped, or looking at certain roles or jobs and saying, you know what, if the waiter, a great meal, I will tip, and I will tip extravagantly on that because I really enjoyed this. You know what? You brought my car around. Come on, really? Am I going to tip the value? Just whatever it is, right? We can have different standards for different jobs.
Do you tip?
By the way, just so you know,
yeah.
I've always tipped the hotel maids.
Well, you went to an Ivy League school. You're very sophisticated. I went to a state.
No. You know what it is? They get to be in my room when I'm not there. Look, I want to be on their good side. I want them to take care of me and for us to have a good relationship.
Do you tip Starbucks or Pete's Coffee people?
You know what? Here's the thing. I like to use the app, and the app kind of takes that out of the equation.
Yes.
My wife is a big tipper when it comes to coffee and picking stuff up like that. I'm not as extravagant there.
All right.
I'm not.
No, that's very, very fair. Okay, I got 3 minutes left. I got a bunch of things I could talk to you about. Let's just address this. Let's now shift to the NBA. Baseball yesterday, I thought it was really not great optics. Started arguing about revenue sharing in a pandemic with 20% unemployment coming. I do feel like the NBA would go for it if they got the testing, there are blood tests now. You can poke a finger, find out immediately, have it, don't have it. So I do think the NBA, at least for me as a consumer, they're coming across like, we'll play. We just got to get the testing right. Is that fair?
Well, yeah, and it's not just the testing for the players. It's the testing for anybody in America wants to get tested, they can. They don't want the PR nightmare of, oh, wait a minute, you're getting preferential treatment. I'm in Butte, Montana, and I have symptoms, and I can't get a test. But LeBron James can get a test every day just so we can play NBA games. From what I've read, as you have, that widespread availability, we are on the cusp of that. Certainly should have it by the end of the month. And to me, that is the one element outside of the NBA's purview that they want in place. Everything else, as long as they can negotiate it with their players, and trust me, there's going to be a little bit of hardball here with the players because there is going to be a risk factor for the players.
Sure.
You can't completely eliminate it, but the reality is you're not going to be able to eliminate it not only for this season, but for next season. We're not going to have a vaccine in place by the time that next season starts. So you're going to have to play at some point without having a vaccine available, which means that there's going to be a risk factor. The hard reality of it is that the NBA needs to get back to business, or their entire revenue structure with the salary cap and everything else is going to be crushed. And I am just waiting for the owners, if there's any pushback from the players on resuming this season without a vaccine, that the owners are going to say, if you take us to there, we're going to hit the nuclear button. We're going to blow up the CBA, and we're going to start this thing from scratch, and you're not going to like the terms. I don't know that they get there, but I know that that's in the owner's back pocket.
Yeah, let's remember that. So players have taken a pay cut now. I'd never forget recessions, depressions, or garage sales for the wealthy, and the owners will have massive leverage out of this, not the players. If the players go hardball and say we're not going to do it, then next year, billionaires have a lot of leverage and a lot of capital.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
They will make sure that they are not getting the short end of this.
Yeah.
And that the players will compensate for whatever is lost.
Okay, we got to go. Ric Bucher, a tipper except for coffee. I'm a tipper except for hotels, and I feel terribly guilty about it. All right.
I drink a lot of coffee, too, so it's not a good look on me.
All right, good talking to you, bud.
You got it.